What happened after the '08 financial crisis is that big business was the bad guy in this country. Wall Street was the bad guy in this country. And I understand why. I personally believe that the bailouts after the '08 financial crisis were one of the most ignominious economic decisions made by modern American policymakers in modern history.
And you break down how favorites were played.
Were absolutely played. It was crony capitalism at its worst. And so the American public was appropriately quite jaded by it. I actually blame a lot of the Republican Party at the time for making that decision. 100% to blame for a new model of crony capitalism.
And I think the chickens came home on that with Trump. I think a lot of the people who turned in the Republican establishment did so because they saw the favorites being played during that time.
Yes, so that definitely is true as a political point. But if we go back to 2008, whoever you blame, crony capitalism was a problem.
Sure.
The public was jaded with capitalism. And what the old left wanted to do is that they wanted to take money then from those wealthy corporate fat cats, many of whom got paid even though they shouldn't have justifiably been paid through free market capitalism, take money from those wealthy corporate fat cats and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people. Not my preferred policy mode, but agree or not, that is what the old left wanted to do.
Right.
But right around that time, you had the first black president of the United States, Barack Obama, elected, the birth of a new diversity-obsessed woke left, waking up to historically identity politics-based injustices. And what this new woke left said, that actually the real problem wasn't quite poverty in this country. It wasn't quite economic injustice. No, the real problem was racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry. And guess what? That actually created the opportunity of a generation for big business in this country to realize they could actually go from being the bad guys to being the good guys if they just said the right things, just like we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
Applauding diversity and inclusion, putting token minorities on your boards, musing about climate change, whatever the case may be. And so that was the heart of this arranged marriage where you had a bunch of woke millennials effectively get in bed with a bunch of Wall Street bankers, as I tell in the book. Together they birthed woke capitalism, and they used that to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. And then Silicon Valley gets in on the act, does the exact same thing. The rest of corporate America gets in on the act. And that's the birth of, that's what I think of as not really an arranged marriage. It's really more like mutual prostitution. But the net result was the illegitimate birth of this woke industrial complex, which is a force that is far more powerful than either big government or big business, because it's a hybrid of the two that can do together what either one of them can't do on its own. And the last thing I want to say is from a conservative perspective too. I mean, liberals look the other way with respect to this abuse of corporate power because at least they're advancing the causes they care about. But a lot of conservatives look the other way because their inner conscience tells them that the free market can do no wrong.
That's right.
Without recognizing that the free market that we idealize does not exist today when it is commingled with state power and ideological power. And so both sides are duped to see the rise of this new monster, this new Leviathan, if I may, that's far more frightening than what Thomas Hobbes envisioned 400 years ago. It is far more frightening than anything our founding fathers envisioned 250 years ago. And I think that is the defining challenge for not only the future of the conservative movement, but the future of the American movement, to recognize that the biggest threat to liberty and prosperity today is not big government. It might have been in 1980. It is not today. It is this new hybrid of big government and big business that is far more powerful.
You're right about this, that it's not even just the corporations, which of course are a problem at this point. You wrote a whole book about it. But it is the hybrid. And that's one thing that's been fascinating to me, is to see how slow some conservatives have been to understand this concept, that the key to being a trillion-dollar company at this point is not necessarily being the best company. It's not being a robber baron or having the best steel business or having the best railroad business. It is about government contracts. It is about getting the best.
It is about government capture.
Government capture. It is about the deals that the government allows. I mean, and you could speak about this with biotech. I mean, a lot of it's dependent on government approving what you're doing. And then you can see the Biden administration, so many people during the Trump administration, they were cutting deals on behalf of Google and Microsoft with the Pentagon. I mean, that's how you get to be that size.
But let me say one thing about crony capitalism 2.0 today. That's really different than crony capitalism 1.0. The directionality is bidirectional today, and the currency is a little different too. Let me explain it. Crony capitalism 1.0 is really simple. You have executives at Goldman Sachs write nice fat checks, give it to a PAC, give it directly to a campaign, hire some lobbyists, get your alumni placed in the administration. Pretty simple system. Get political favors in return. Everyone gets how that works. It's ugly. It's how it works. People get what that is. Crony capitalism 2.0 is different in two respects. One is when the ascendant party in power may not actually accept those political favors through the front door. Say when Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders were frontrunners of the Democratic primary, Goldman Sachs realizes that it needs to use a new currency.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren said she's not going to take money from them. She said she's not going to appoint any Goldman alumni or Wall Street alumni into her administration. Say what you will about Elizabeth Warren, and I have a lot of critical things to say about her. That's a part of her, at least her policy stand that I could I could get on board with. I don't want government in bed with Goldman Sachs. However, Goldman realizes they have a new trick in their arsenal. They realize she may not accept their money, but right in January, when she and Bernie Sanders are the frontrunners in the Democratic primary, that is when they choose to make their declaration from the mountaintops of Davos that Goldman Sachs will not take a company public in the United States if its board is insufficiently diverse.
Right.
Where, of course, diversity is defined by Goldman Sachs on the basis of skin-deep characteristics that are, of course, limited to race, gender, and sexual orientation, not ideological diversity, which, by the way, no one seems interested in. Everyone wants to make sure their board looks the way the rest of America looks without actually worrying an iota of whether they think the way the rest of America thinks. But put the sideshow to one side. This was just tithing in a new currency because Elizabeth Warren is obsessed with identity politics, is obsessed with her status as a woman, is obsessed with her status as a 1/16th Native American or whatever she is. And I think that they are able to tithe.
That's very charitable.
I try to be as charitable as I can. It is tithing in this new currency where if you can't use money, you bow to this new temple of identity politics at the altar in a new way. So that's the first way it's different. The second way it's different than crony capitalism 1.0 is even scarier, though. Is that it's not just about giving money to government officials or their campaigns. It's actually about doing favors for government itself in return. And what you see today is it's not just private companies using government to do what private companies couldn't do on their own. It is government using private companies to do through the back door what government cannot do directly through the front door under the Constitution. That is the defining feature of today's crony capitalism, where with big tech censorship, you have a lot of Republicans who are duped into saying that these are private companies that are free to decide what does and doesn't show up on their website.
Yeah.
You know what I say to that? You're right, if they're actually behaving as private companies. But these companies are now working hand in glove with the party in power, responding to their threats, responding to their inducements, including in the form of liability protection like Section 230, working hand in glove with the government and the White House that's in power today to take down misinformation and hate speech as defined by the ruling party, as defined by the ruling president.
Yeah.
But they effectively are then doing the government's bidding in the guise of a private enterprise. And one of the core theses in this book is that if it is state action in disguise, then guess what? Actually, legally speaking, the Constitution still applies. That these companies ought to be bound by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States when they're censoring content on behalf of the government that the government could not be censoring directly.